start recording in three, two, and one. Right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL, and just the EPL this time. We're done. We're done with the World Cup, and it's back, and we're back to doing our normal show again. So, I'm pretty excited about that. I'm your host Ben, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Rex. So, Rex, did you enjoy that Boxing Day offering?
Yeah, it was a little weird being back. It was just different vibes all around. But yeah, it was good to be back. I kind of don't like the break though. I kind of forgot all the storylines in the Premier League and
Hmm.
had to be like reminded of all of them. And it was it was weird. But getting back into the swing of things now, and we got a lot of matches, like almost matches every day coming up. So yeah, it's good to be back. It was a little weird though, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely feels weird. Basically, like you said, following the storylines. Um, it's also weird, also where players are basically just trying to get points, each week, as opposed to like being super desperate just to advance or to not lose. I think you kind of saw like it's like some teams are fine with a draw, essentially, and like things like that. Like the level was definitely, but then again, it's over an entire season, so that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
but just one thing I kind of want to get into, and I was mentioning it to you before we even started, was I was a little annoyed how like NBC had like their big like pregame show. They started the game with the Spurs and Brentford, and they were at the Emirates. They were at the Emirates all day, and then they were like, "Oh, we're just going to move this. This will be on the stream for Peacock." And so you built up the Arsenal game all day long, and no, you had to go elsewhere to try to find it, and it was a good game. And we're definitely gonna talk about that. There are a lot of storylines to get over to. Um,
Mhm.
just for a Liverpool perspective, all of a sudden, they had a good result as well, and then right after that, they've turned around and done a little business. So they've opened up a January present, kind of early,
Yeah.
and it looks like it's official that they've uh, nabbed Cody Gakpo of PSV Eindhoven, and this is this has gotten mixed reaction online. People are wondering, well, you see have Luis Diaz and Diego Jota are both basically left-sided players. Darwin Nunes is basically a left-sided player as well. Is that too much? Like, what's going to happen when everyone's fit? I mean, the issue is everyone hasn't been fit for a couple of years now. It's good to finally have some depth. Firmino is on his last year of his contract. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be extended. So they were going to need to bring in an attacker anyways. You would think. Um, the last couple of games, they tried Oxlade Chamberlain and Fabio Cavallo in that left wing spot, and it just did not work. And so basically, they're not going to have Luis Diaz, I think, till March because he had a setback. Trying to recover from injury, and then Jota is probably not going to be available probably till late February, so he might miss the Champions League fixture. So this was needed. Everything.
This was a great signing, man. He's really good, and y'all got a good price for him, considering like, I mean, people that are comparable to him that might leave, like Mudrick, is going to cost like Shakhtar want like 100 million for him. So it's a great price. It's a great deal. If some Liverpool fans are complaining, I think that's stupid because like you can't rely on Jota to be healthy, and it's kind of looking like you might not be able to rely on Diaz to be healthy. So you got to have options, and we talked about that all season so far with their midfield, the lack of options and depth. And I mean, this won't help like the center of the park, but this will certainly help the attacking options.
Yeah, I mean, and that I think that's kind of the reason. Liverpool fans are kind of worried that they spent all this money, to help out their attack. Well, what's going to happen in January if they don't, or are they not going to sign a midfielder? Or are they putting all their eggs in the Jude Bellingham basket again in the summertime? So I think that's more the reason why there's a little angst. It's looking like Chelsea might be in the running. Chelsea and Newcastle in the running for Enzo Fernandez. It looks like he might be the prized possession, at least for the midfield. And when you talk about Liverpool, I think you're right. The issue really has been in that middle of the park, and we'll get to that. I'm kind of going on a little bit longer. I mean, want to do like you said, it has been a bit. So let's do a mini recap. We'll go over the top six, and then maybe mention the bottom three and a couple of the clubs that are basically around the bottom three because there are a lot, and
Yeah.
this is going to be fluid. This is going to change a lot, especially with games every 3 or 4 days for the next week at least. To start off, Arsenal did what they needed to do. So they're on 40 points with after 15 games played. Newcastle are behind them on 33 points. Or actually, Man City is. Newcastle's on 33 points in third place with 16 games played. Man City, I guess, is on 35 points. That's right.
Yeah.
I did this before yesterday. Also 15 games played, and then Spurs are behind. It's still in fourth, but everyone is kind of getting close to them on 30 points with 16 games played. So Man City has a game in hand. Man United has a game in hand, and they're only 1 point back. And then Liverpool are in sixth with 25 points, and it's looking a bit of a steep climb for them. In the bottom three, we have Wolves on 13 points, Nottingham Forest on 13 points, and a bit of a surprise. I mean, I knew they were close to the bottom, but I guess with Wolves getting that win over Everton, they jumped over everyone. And Southampton's on 12. Southampton is now on the bottom team, and we'll get to their game. I'm maybe more worried about Southampton than really any, well, other than Forest, any other team. To be honest, I did not really like what I saw, and I don't really know
Yeah.
if I'm going to believe in the Nathan Jones experiment. Because right now is not a time to experiment. And you had
Yeah.
Hasenhüttl who knew how to do this. Um, but right behind them is Everton. So we're going to talk about them and Lampard because I think if he doesn't maybe get the result he needs next game, it might not be a happy new year for him. And then Moyes is on, or David Moyes and West Ham are on 14 points as well. They're not out of the gates, and neither is Jesse Marsh and Leeds on 15 points. And Bournemouth are sitting comfortably in the table, but they're on 16 points. So all of this can change again week to week. And if you are those clubs, this has got to be one hectic time to be a supporter.
Yeah, definitely, especially with like some teams having played more or less than others. But yeah, Southampton, man, out of the last five, they are by far the worst in points. They only have 1 point out of their last five. So
Mm.
even some of those, like not Nottingham Forest has 7 points out of the last five. Even Everton has four at least. So yeah, I think they're deserving of being down there. And I think I agree with you. Hasenhüttl probably shouldn't have been fired. Just because, like you said, he knows how to get the teams out of there. Maybe in the summer, if he does stay up, then you could maybe get rid of him and start dreaming about moving up the table and not having to scrap for survival. But I think an experienced guy that can keep you in the Premier League, I think it was kind of stupid to get rid of him, especially like just halfway through the season. I know they have the World Cup, but it just doesn't make much sense.
Right before this everyone knew about the Christmas break. Once
Hmm.
the season restarted, and it was going to be game after game after game, really quickly. I mean, after this hectic stretch, there's a couple like FA weeks where I think there's only like maybe one game or two played after the first week in January. So that could have been a
Yeah.
time to maybe do some of this and experiment. But anyways, um, I think what we'll do is we'll get started with the Brentford and Spurs game. So the first game that started that kicked off the return, and it was a good game to bring us back. It ends 2-2. The first goal from Janelt, and then Tony, and then it looks like Brentford were actually somewhat comfortable, to be honest. And then Kane got one back with a header, and then Højbjerg shortly after that. And then, to be honest, it actually looked like maybe Spurs were going to be the team to get something here, and Brentford were able to just kind of hold on. And apparently, they mentioned it during the game. They're really good at least once they get their first goal, they're really good at least sticking out or getting a point. I don't think they've lost a game under Thomas Frank when they've gotten
Ooh,
the first goal. I think it's 13 wins and 3 draws. And so,
pretty good.
you saw a little bit of that. You saw, in the beginning, it was them kind of being on the front foot, and in the end, it was them just kind of being desperate. But sometimes desperate works. So, I don't know. Where do you want to get started with this, Rex?
Well, it's kind of a theme with Brentford recently. They've been kind of blowing leads, and again, like 2-0 up, and you're in the 64th minute. You would expect a team to hang on to that lead, and they really haven't been doing it. I know they still got a point, and it's a good point, but being up 2-0 and dominating for 60 plus minutes, it really kind of feels like a loss to not get all 3 points. And a lot of draws this season for Brentford, and that's part of the reason why they are where they are in the table. Just a few of those draws, if you get wins, then they're moving up, and they're still pretty safe, but you can get dragged under into that relegation zone so easily, and eight draws, and especially again like 2-0 up, they got to close some of these out. They kind of seem like, I don't know, like they blow leads, but they can also come back, because we saw in the opening game they were down 2-0 and came back. So I don't know, just it's weird because they weren't really doing this last year. If they had a 2-0 lead, they'd hang on to it and win. But they're still in 10th. So if they can figure that out, kind of close some of these games out, and also they need to up that level. Like I want to see them play the way they did in the first 60 minutes against like lower teams too, like the Evertons and the West Hams. Sometimes they do tend to play down a little bit, but it was a good game. I'll take the point. It just kind of stinks that they did have the 2-0 lead, with 25 minutes to go, and blew it. So I know Frank will be trying to get those into wins for sure. Because
Mhm.
I mean, if you have two of those draws and you turn those into 6 points, then they're moving up to. I mean, they're up right behind like Liverpool in six.
Yeah.
So they're close, but some of those draws need to be wins.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's definitely going to be in their favor is, and I didn't even realize this, to be honest, this is one of those storylines you kind of forget about. Is Ivan Tony is third, win in two goals scored. I think he's either 10 or 11, and when you have a guy that's prolific like that, anytime you are in some kind of fight, having someone reliable is certainly a way to help. One thing that I definitely noticed was, at least in that first half, it helped having Christian Nordgaard back.
Oh yeah.
And so that allowed Janelt to maybe be a little more aggressive. He was able to get forward a little bit more. I think you saw that for the goal. It was also a bit of a different role, I thought, for Jensen, and Jensen was good as well. But all three were very good at just really pressing and closing down Spurs in that first half. The problem is that takes a lot of energy, and I think one thing that really kind of showed up, at least in that second half, to me, was once Spurs were able to kind of hold on to the ball a little bit more. They were able to get their fullbacks a little higher, and that kind of pushed Brentford deeper. And really, the only thing that Brentford were able to do was just go long, and they're good at going long.
Mhm.
With Bremer and Tony. But when that doesn't necessarily always work, you're giving the ball away. And I think that really was kind of the issue to me, especially after they conceded the second goal. It was almost desperation time. I mean, Brentford with 39% of the ball and 213 passes. The 64% though is what I'm concerned about. Is they don't pass the ball enough for my liking. I mean, the long balls was 28 of 75. That's a pretty good percentage. I mean, Spurs were 18 of 37. So I mean, it was a completely different game the way that they played. But one thing that Brentford was very very good at was they didn't really allow space behind, and so you saw Son struggle a lot in this game. And
Yeah, he did.
frankly, yeah, it wasn't until Spurs were actually able to kind of take a couple players on, where and it was kind of led by Kane, to be honest, but also Kulishevsky. Kulishevsky really woke up in the
Oh
second
yeah.
half, and
Yeah, it's good to have him back for Tottenham.
that was finally when you saw Spurs kind of wake up a little bit. I mean, to get to the goals, I mean, does get the first one, and yeah, it's basically a typical Brentford goal, to be honest. It's just a long ball by Raya. Ivan Tony wins the first ball. He heads it to Embremo, and then Embremo does very good to square the ball. That I think Jensen hits his first time, and I think it even takes a deflection, so it's a little luck here. But it's good to hit it first time, because I think if he waits, um, there would have been a defender to probably be there for Yanelt, so maybe this doesn't even happen. It is worth saying that Spurs did go into this game with the backup keeper. Hugo Lloris wasn't able to go. I don't necessarily know if that necessarily factored in, but it maybe could have. Um, and then
Yeah, it might have.
yeah, and then the second goal really was, it's a good goal by Brentford, but it's a complete gift from Spurs. Frankly, there's a ball headed up to Eric Dyer, and I don't know if you remember this. he has all the time in the world to kind of just do whatever to get rid of it. He can control it. There's no one really around him, and he tries to just hit this first time, and he slices it out of bounds. Just gives away a completely
Yeah.
free corner kick. And on the ensuing corner kick, Norgard is the one that wins the header. He just heads it, kind of flicks it across goal, and Tony's there just with no one near him. So it's pretty easy and easy, good to go. And it was looking pretty comfortable, to be honest, for Spurs at this moment. And then just out of nowhere, Harry Kane kind of woke up. And one thing that's worth saying is it is good for him because everyone remembers basically the last kick of his World Cup. And so it took a while for him to wake up, but once he did, yeah, it definitely showed.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a it's just a ball crossed into him. I think it by Longley, and it's a good header by him. And then right after that, very shortly after that, Spurs were also able to get the ball, and they were able to kind of keep it in the Brentford half. And that's when Kulishevsky decided to try to take a couple players on, and then he did a 1-2 pass with Doughty. So Perisic was able to get higher in the second half, and so was Doughty. And this goal happened because of Kulishevsky and Doughty's 1 and 2 together. And then Kulishevsky squares the ball. It's deflected. So again, there's a little luck here, but it falls to Højbjerg. And probably the issue, I guess, for Brentford to be concerned about was Højbjerg was completely free on goal. Just in the box. No one really marked him, and yeah, it was a good finish by him. And then yeah, right there, it was pretty much hang on for dear life. Um, One thing that maybe is worth saying is there was a couple times for Brentford to actually win this outright. And Bremo, if he could just be half the finisher that Tony is, I do think they would be, like you said, right there with Liverpool. I mean, Brentford and Bremo's got
Yeah.
so many good things to offer. But sometimes you can see maybe why he hasn't necessarily been sought after by other clubs. Is he has great work rate. He makes great runs. He makes good decisions. To be honest, it's just he lashed the ball over the top when it was squared to him. Could have put that on goal, but really, the one I want to focus on was he was through on goal, and instead of trying to go past Fraser Foster, like we saw Ivan Toney do earlier in the game, it was offsides, but he still was able to do it. He tried to buy a PK. He just kind of he basically did a dive. He maybe you could have even tried to flick it. And it was just one of those things where just a little better head. And maybe Brentford get that third goal, and they don't really have to worry about the rest of the game. So
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree. And Bumo does. He gets assist at least, but yeah, and he doesn't score very often. I think he scored like 3 goals last year as well. So it really is pretty reliant on Tony scoring a lot of goals for Brentford to be in it, and that's worrisome, especially considering the gambling things coming up, and I don't really know. I've been trying to avoid that. I don't know when like any of that suspensions might be coming up. But if you don't have Tony, if he
oh,
gets hurt
you're
too,
right.
it's yeah.
I entirely
Oh
forgot what
yeah,
you were talking about.
added more charges over the last week too. So I don't know.
Ooh.
We'll see. But without Tony, they're in trouble. So that's another reason why you got to like cash in on these 3 points instead of the one, because you don't know how long you're gonna have Tony. Who knows when he's gonna be gone?
Oh, that's scary. I did not think about that at all. I mean, one thing that's kind of funny is, I mean, Jeremy even brought this up during the game, is he basically said there's a pretty good argument to make, a pretty good case to make that Ivan Toney is the most important player for their club team right now. Um, it was hard for me to disagree. I ended up saying after thinking about it, maybe Mitrovic. And it's kind of like the similar deal. And I said that before the Fulham Palace game, and we'll get to why Mitrovic is a good answer for that. But it's a pretty good case for Tony as well. And so if that would happen, that would be disastrous.
Yeah, I just don't know where the goals would come from.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny because basically it felt like these two teams really do kind of mirror each other. Um, Brentford are very good in the first half, and kind of they can be desperate in the second half. Spurs are just lackluster. Almost they don't even like try in the first half, and then they're amazing in the second half. But another thing too was it did feel both teams were kind of waiting for. They're basically waiting for the other team to kind of turn it over and to be sloppy. You don't really see a lot of creation other than the front players. and
Right.
I think we'll kind of get to that more with Spurs. I mean, the lack of creativity, I do think, really does show, and that's the reason why they really do need to get their wingbacks higher up, especially Perisic. Perisic, one of their better players on the ball. Another thing I kind of saw was their back three is really poor. I mean,
Yeah.
Eric Dyer just completely. Yeah, he's been talked up as maybe a playmaking center back. He's not. He's uh, Conte for Conte to be able to actually have Spurs where they are with Eric Dyer, Longley, Tanganga was very poor in this game as well. Sanchez isn't necessarily someone you rate. It actually is kind of impressive, to be honest, because without Eric Romero, they don't really have a playmaking center back, someone with good on the ball. But another thing too is they can't play a high line with those center backs, and so that kind of stresses their midfield as well. Maybe that's the reason why he plays such a defensive-minded midfield is they have to be able to be defensive.
Absolutely. Maybe that's why too their fullbacks, wingbacks don't get up as much because
Yeah.
their center backs are really slow. We talked about it, yeah, like all year, super slow center backs. Romero's good though, but other than that, ugh, a little worrisome. But yeah, Conte is a defensive first kind of guy, and he deserves credit for making that defense get clean sheets. Honestly, but yeah, it was almost like the first half they just were out of sorts and out of sync, and they were kind of sleepwalking through it. And then I guess Conte maybe lit a fire in them at halftime, and they kind of came out and they were the Spurs that we are used to seeing, and probably that'll be what we see most of the time going forward. And they have Richarlison too, who isn't playing yet, but
Sure.
good to see Kulusevski back at least.
hmm Yeah, I mean, and you definitely saw what he means. But another thing too is it's worth saying this as well. I think it's basically 7 of the last 8 games. They've been down at halftime, and I guess
Wow, that's crazy.
one stat that I guess is good for Spurs, but I don't think Conte is going to want it. Is no team has won more points from losing positions than them this season. So they've gotten used to it, but it is interesting to see how much different they are from the first half to the second half, and it's hard to say it's not almost unintentional. Like it they were pressing, they were running much harder, to trying to win the ball back in the second half. The wingbacks were higher up, that kind of helped as well. And maybe it was a tactical, maybe it was strategy, because it seemed Brentford's legs kind of gave out on them a little bit in the second half, and maybe that was the reason why they were kind of they were kind of holding on a little bit towards the end.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean they could have scored. Raya, I think, made a save, and someone hit the post for Tottenham. I can't remember who.
It was
So
Kane.
I mean,
Kane had a header.
Kane.
Yeah.
So they could have easily won, and I think Son had that good shot that Raya saved.
hmm
Later on in the game too. So yeah, Brentford kind of lucky to get out of it with just a point, but going forward, that's the Tottenham we would like to see, at least in the attacking wise, because they do have the ability to do that. They got a lot of attacking players, and Kulisevsky back obviously just helps that. Richarlison when he gets back, he'll help that too. But they need to get more Son still. Son hasn't really been firing like he was last year, and I thought, well, it's too early to tell. It's just one game, but I thought maybe the World Cup would kind of reignite that, and you'd start seeing him get a little bit more goals and assists this year. But I don't know. It's just one game, but we'll see.
I mean, and another thing too is I really thought signing Yves Bissouma was going to be a good signing, and it just has not worked out at all. I mean, he hasn't played that much, and when he has featured, he hasn't really helped them out. Much either winning the ball back or being on the ball. And yeah, he's a defensive minded midfielder, but he showed a little quality when he was at Brighton. And he's been a little disappointing. Like everything is
Yeah,
reliant on getting the ball to Kane or somehow getting the ball to Kulishevsky in the middle third or final third, or trying to get Son kind of on a run. It feels like very they're not very inventive, or yeah, it just it's like that the passing is kind of weird, and really
yeah,
the
it's
reason
predictable.
the predictable is a good predictable is a good word for it. Maybe safe, another they don't really take risk, kind of like what you were saying, But I mean,
Yeah.
the reason why it is different in the second half is they just started crossing the ball into the box. They didn't care necessarily losing it or not. And Kane was able to kind of get on the end of some of those.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's weird too with Basuma because that's their strongest position on the field is those like defensive midfielders because they already have Hoiberg and then Betancourt's been playing amazing. Betancourt I think is still given some time off for the World Cup,
Well, they
but
missed.
those two players
He
have
got
been playing
hurt.
well.
He got hurt for
Oh, he got
Uruguay.
hurt.
Yeah, I
I
need
thought
to
he was still
I need to look into that actually, to see
because he was playing
if
very
that's long
well
term.
and was starting to score
He
too.
is good. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
so like it's kind of weird that I mean, I get strengthening that area, but that was already a pretty good area of depth for them. But I don't know. I think I don't know. Maybe this will give Bazuma some time to grow into his Tottenham role. Just giving him
mhm.
some playing time for a couple games until Bencourt gets healthy. Maybe that'll help like kind of kick Basuma into the gear that we're used to seeing him when he was at Brighton.
That's a good call. I mean, they also have like Harry Winks and Skip. Now I know people are gonna
Oh yeah,
laugh at the Winks thing, but Winks played a year ago versus Liverpool, and he was very good. He just hasn't
for Skip
necessarily
too is in there.
gotten his time.
Hmm.
That's a great shout on Betancourt though. That is a giant miss. But
I didn't
yeah,
know he's hurt. I was hoping they were just giving him time off, but
but well, that's enough about the Spurs game. We'll move on to maybe the talk of London right now in West Ham v Arsenal. It's Arsenal. And a bit of I guess the shock was we finally got to see a little adversity. They've had a lot of time to kind of sit on this 5 point lead that they had coming in. I'm sure it's what everyone kind of talked about, and or everyone in their family or friend circle. And it started off with actually West Ham getting the first goal with Ben Rama PK, and it's a bit of a mistake by Saliba. Saliba just kind of
yeah,
first he doesn't get tight on Antonio, and then he allows Bowen to get behind him, and then he goes to ground and gets Bowen. But none of that mattered. In fact, I think it was actually 1-0 at halftime, and then Arsenal just really woke up in the second half. And credit to them, they didn't panic. It didn't seem like there was any kind of changes at all. It just kind of played their game. And I think if you're an Arsenal fan or Arteta, I, it couldn't have gone better because you got a little adversity, you got a little scare, and you got all three of your front players, including Eddie and Katia, scored. And
oh yeah,
it's got to be big for Nketiah's confidence as well. So that's kind of setting
yeah,
it up.
yeah. I
I
think
mean,
so.
what were your first takeaways, Rex?
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, going down early, obviously, kind of scary. And Saliba is kind of a dumb challenge. He didn't really need to do it, but you know, after that, going into halftime, I was like, okay, hopefully we can kind of change things around because they do tend to respond well to adversity and being down this year. That's one of the reasons why they're playing so well. But at the same time, there's still enough there. There's still, moving the ball really quick, really slick passing. There's enough there to be hopeful that they could just, have a little bit more class in the box or a little bit better finishing and they could score. So I think that's why Arteta didn't change things because he still liked what he saw. It
Hmm.
was kind of, against the run of play, the PK was for West Ham. So I think that was huge to not panic and just be like, hey, we're playing well. Let's just keep doing it, keep doing what we're doing, and we'll get goals. And once that first goal comes, then the players actually believe that, oh yeah, we can win now. We just got to keep playing the way we're playing. Look, we just got a goal, and then from there they just started heating up, and they scored 2 goals in 5 minutes, and then Nketiah scoring is just the cherry on top because a lot of people on social media don't think he can step in and be the striker, at least be the striker that gets them, first place until Jesus comes back.
Hmm.
But he kind of showed it last year. I think he scored 7 goals in 8 games last year when he was the main man. So it's huge for his confidence, and I'm hoping he can step up in that role because he is a good player, and he's been playing second fiddle a lot of his career. So it's nice to see him be able to step up and play and score and help out the attack. So hopefully going forward, that's something he can do too.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was actually talking a little bit with Andrew. My brother is an Arsenal fan as well. Is it? in some of these games, it's almost it's maybe more beneficial to play Nketiah over Jesus. Whereas Jesus, I think, will be missed. Will be those games where you need someone to kind of drop into midfield to kind of help with build up play or to try to keep the ball a little bit more. But Nketiah does seem to be more of a guy that likes to stay in the box. And he seems to make pretty good runs. I think they actually said he's on a pretty good goal scoring week when he plays. It's just
Yeah,
his
yeah, he is.
yeah, his just issue hasn't been played enough. But I
Yeah.
do want to go over a couple of these goals because there was a bit of a theme, and the theme was winning the ball back off West Ham, and another theme was kind of bullying Declan Rice and doing it as well. I mean, the first one with Bukayo Saka. There's a little luck in this, but a ton of skill. So it starts with a party kind of being sloppy with the ball, but he's able to run back and basically wins the ball off Declan Rice. And then they find Odegaard. I think Odegaard is trying to shoot here, so that's where the kind of the luck
I
comes
think so
from.
too.
But
Yeah.
it goes right to Saka's book, and it's a fantastic first touch. I mean,
Oh
he
yeah.
easily could a heavy touch here, and the chance is gone. But he basically cushions it, and because he cushions it, he's able to take it in stride, and basically he can pick whatever spot he wants, and he finishes it in the corner. And Saka Saka was fantastic this game.
Oh yeah.
He scored earlier. It wasn't even counted after doing. I think he got a back heel from Encadia. Um, but
Oh
he was
yeah.
just lively, and he was just bullying, but both on the ball, and he was a terrorizer, pressing. Um, but the second goal is one I want to touch on as well because again, Declan Rice was bullied on the first one, and here he's bullied by Saka. I mean, you understand maybe him getting the ball off Partey, but Saka basically wins the ball on the air and he kind of uses his body to kind of fool Rice a little bit. Then then he uses Ben Wright's run, kind of running, doing an overlap to fool Rice. Rice thinks he's going to pass it, and then he kind of flicks it over to Odegaard instead. Odegaard gets it to Shaka. He's the top of the box, and then Shaka quickly feeds in Martinelli. And the reason why this goal is really good by Martinelli is he first takes a touch with, I guess, his left foot, and then he moves it with his right before striking it with his left again. But that little pause is what kind of creates this because Sufal is in the. I think he's in a pretty decent position when Martinelli first gets the ball, and if Martinelli just tries to sprint, for his first time or tries to take a touch, I think Sufal is able to get there. I think he's able to slide. But because Martinelli kind of paused for a little bit, that forced Sufal to pause as well. And then the quick restart, and that got Sufal a little off balance. And yeah, maybe I'll leave it up to the goalkeepers union. It is a shot, kind of a near post from a tight angle. It's a good shot. It's a fantastic shot by Martinelli, but it feels like Fabianski maybe could have had that covered a little bit better.
Yeah, I think so. He kind of like slipped. It looked like in the build-up maybe, or I don't know, maybe just like saw it late. But yeah, I kind of thought maybe he could have done better. But it was a good finish.
Takes it early. Maybe
Martinelli
he just wasn't
deserved it. But
didn't think
yeah,
Martinelli had that in his finish. I didn't know he had a left foot.
maybe.
Um,
Yeah, maybe that's why he wasn't set and kind of slipped. Perhaps.
Yeah, and then we should talk about the third as well. Just because I mean it's actually a relatively clever team goal. I mean it starts again from by Saka just kind of pitching the ball off Cresswell. Cresswell is basically forced on the sideline. He tries to go backwards, and Saka just kind of gets him to turn it over. And then really this is all about just kind of finding where the spaces were. And you mentioned like the quick passing, and it really shows up when they do get the ball in the final third. I mean Saka to
Oh yeah.
Martinelli back. Martinelli actually looked like he's cornered by four defenders, but no one really gets tight on
Mm.
him. So Martinelli's able to again turn, get the ball to Shaka, finds Ben White, and then the goal basically comes from this. So Ben White does a very clever touch to kind of flick the ball in the air. To I guess he gets by maybe it's Ben Rama or Cresswell again, and then he gets it to Odegaard, and then Odegaard just quickly Odegaard's between Declan Rice and Suchek. But Odegaard, instead of taking a touch or trying to maybe look at his options, he quickly one times it to Nketiah, who's able to kind of spin Kerr and finish it in the corner. And the reason why Kerr looks really foolish here is uh, Nketiah basically he's filling him with I guess the left arm, and then he moves to the right. and it looks like he's maybe going to go that way. So Nketiah or Kerr is kind of guessing he's going to go that way, and Nketiah just spins the other way. It's fantastic holding play,
Yeah,
and
it's
again,
great.
it's one of those things where this is what you need in a number nine, someone that is good with his back to goal and that can also put him away.
Yeah, because even when Jesus comes back, like you said, he's a different style of player. So if things aren't working with Jesus, you can kind of have a taller target man. So it's great, and it's good that he's getting this experience. Because I think it really helped him last year too, just
Mhm.
being able to have a run of games starting and playing like at least 70, 60, 70 minutes. I think that helped. So I think this will help him again. And worst case scenario, if he does want to leave, he's playing pretty well. Maybe he gets Arsenal a little bit higher price point
I
at
think
the very
so.
worst, at least.
Yeah.
But good depth. If Jesus is going to play above him when Jesus is healthy, it's good depth to have too. And like you mentioned, different type of strikers always good to have in the locker too.
Yeah, and before we kind of get a little bit more into Arsenal, I think one thing I want to touch on is the passing. The passing starting to mimic, Man City last year. I mean, Man City this year are a different animal, but 588 passing on 89% versus West Ham. It almost feels like more the style of playing doesn't work anymore. You have to force someone to turn it over if because a team like Arsenal isn't going to turn it over but by themselves, or if they
Yeah,
are, they're going to turn the ball. It's going to be out of bounds. It's not going to be. You're not going to have those transition moments. And Arsenal are really good at just not allowing those transition moments anymore.
yeah. Yeah, it's been nice. You can kind of, with the passing too, you can kind of see, the Pep influence in Arteta's like gameplay and Arteta's like coaching philosophy and style, which is which is awesome. I mean, that's part of the reason why they got him because he was, apprenticing under one of the best for a couple years. So you can kind of see Pep's rubbed off on him, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah. And another player to kind of touch on is Martin Odegaard. One of the
Yeah.
reasons why I actually think missing Jesus isn't going to necessarily show up a ton is you have a ton of creation in this side already. And Odegaard is a big reason of that. Frankly, he's getting better. I
Yeah,
used to think
I think so.
he was going to be a bit of like a Bruno player, just kind of he could only play in a 10 role and that's it. He's starting to play, basically the right side in midfield, and he's commanding it. And I think he had an assist, maybe two assists, in this
Yeah,
game.
yeah, 2 assists.
One
Yeah, two
one
assists.
one by accident, one on purpose, and it feels like he's a captain as well, and that's looking to be if Arsenal do actually go on to do the thing we won't say, them signing
Thank
Odegaard
you.
when they did is going to be a big reason for that. I think.
Yeah. I mean, this guy, I don't know if you know this, Ben, but I mean, this guy's still really young, but when he was 15, he was captain of his pro team in Norway. So he's 15 and he's captain of a professional team in Norway. So, the ceiling. The ceiling is set, so high for him. And yeah, I mean, he was a Real Madrid player for a little bit, and then he was starting to heat up at Sociedad. So I think them grabbing
Yeah.
Arsenal grabbing him when they did is awesome. And I think they did the loan deal, and he was good, but a little streaky. And I think the fact that Arsenal kind of kept the faith in him was part of the reason why Odegaard wanted to stay. And obviously, like I think him and Arteta are on the same wavelength, and they're just making each other better, and it's awesome to see. And he's such a good leader too. He wasn't really didn't talk that much or feature that much in the documentary, but you can tell on the field that he is definitely one of the leaders. And I mean, they got a ton of those too. Like Shaka's one of those guys. A bunch of other guys. So it's good to see finally because for a while they were kind of leaderless, and we didn't know who
Hmm.
who would be the captain, and we kind of made Aubameyang the
Yeah,
captain, and
Aubameyang captain.
obviously not the best captain. So it's good to finally have someone like Odegaard, and he's still really young. He's just going to get better from here.
Yeah, I mean, and another thing to kind of touch on is well, I don't necessarily want to stick on Odegaard. It is kind of funny how I I actually you mentioned him being 15 or 16. I actually did know him when he was 16 because he signed for Real Madrid
Mhm.
basically at that age, and you don't always see those players actually pan out. But like you're saying,
Yeah,
doing the loan deal was smart, and then they turned around and remember we were actually asking you in real time, and you were kind of iffy on it because the price was a little steep. Um, but it always felt like Odegaard was going to be able to fit in Madrid's midfield, and to be able to get him is definitely a bonus. You also having
Yeah,
party behind you helps, and you mentioned Shaka. Um, yeah, I just that midfield is really good. The entire team is just really good at winning the ball back. There's a lot of
mhm.
similarities to an old Klopp side, to be honest. Now that was with Jesus kind of playing the Firmino role, but three of the front three that are very good working without the ball, but also they can be match winners, all three of them, and
Yeah,
that's unique. Another thing, you don't necessarily have the fullback explosion, but Ben White seems to be improving in that position more and more. You see him, and that's kind of important
yeah.
too.
It is, yeah, it is. I mean, he's getting better and better at that spot every day, and we still have options there too with like Tomiyasu,
Mhm.
and we still have Cedric Suarez too, who isn't a bad player. So yeah, I mean, we finally have some depth, and it feels good because, I mean, we're still, some areas I'm worried about. Like obviously losing Jesus really makes me worried, but it
Yeah,
looks now that we have a little bit of depth finally, and one key injury, one key member of the squad being out, possibly, hopefully, won't destroy the rest of our season finally.
I mean I don't want to necessarily dig on the negative, but you kind of did mention it. I do know that they've been linked to a couple names. I mean, would you personally like to see them maybe test something out, or do you want to not want to worry about maybe messing up the team chemistry that they have? Because I think Reece Nelson, who looked very good with Chelsea before the World Cup, I think he has a knock as well. And so that's
Yeah,
another potential option to kind of play out wide to kind of give Saka some rest that maybe you don't have. So I've actually seen rumors, not just heard, of Mudrick and Felix. Maybe Felix on
yeah.
loan. I
Mhm.
mean, do those names kind of excite you, or do you think maybe they should look elsewhere, maybe to kind of get some kind of a defensive cover for Partey, or maybe not even mess with it at all?
Yeah, I don't. It's tough because they are playing well and the chemistry is good. But I think I don't know. Like I see someone like Mudryk, very exciting player, but then I see that Shakhtar want a just absorbent amount of money for him, really. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of. I mean, they want like a hundred mil at least. I think. So I don't know. I think at that point they're gonna have to say no to that. Maybe in the summer he's a little cheaper. I don't know, but I do like the Yao Felix loan move. I think if you bought him, obviously, when Jesus comes back, there's kind
Yeah,
of some issues of where he will play.
I
But a loan deal
feel like
would
that would be
would make
similar.
sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, it would make sense, and because right now Nketiah is the main guy, and there's no one. We haven't recalled Balogun. He's on loan. You could recall him, but there's no one else. So that would at least
Hmm.
provide some cover, and then KT doesn't have to play all the games because they're still in Europa. And it's the beginning of some of these cup competitions. I think they're already knocked out of one, but they got another one too. So and KT can't play all those games. So I like that move. I like it as a loan deal. And obviously it doesn't cost a lot, and it's low risk because if he doesn't pan out, he's back to Athletic at the end of the year. So I think that move works. But
Hmm.
the Mudrick, I'd love to have Mudrick, but I think that just Shakhtar's playing hardball, and it kind of prices Arsenal out of that move, and I think rightfully so because you could get two solid players for one Mudrick. You could get two $50 million players.
Yeah.
So hopefully they go kind of that way, unless Shakhtar does want to lower the fee. But yeah, I think Yao Felix is the one that excites me, and because it's more realistic.
And the way you kind of talked it up too, it makes sense because he's very similar the way he kind of plays with the Jesus. Now we haven't necessarily seen that at Atletico Madrid, but you see that you saw that with Portugal.
Yeah,
He's
I think he's a willing runner.
basically
Yeah,
like a false nine kind of player. And he can work without the ball, but he also he's pretty creative as well. Just again,
yeah,
he's kind of in chains a little bit in Madrid. Um, I mean to also another thing I kind of want to mention is it feels these days, Liverpool were able to get Gakpo for I think 37, but I think the
yeah,
main reason, and there'll be some add-ons, but the main reason
yeah.
is PSV are hurting financially. It almost feels like you have to take that in consideration before a club looks at a player. I guess contract situation goes into it, and also a club's finances. I guess Shakhtar aren't hurting, so they can demand stuff like that. I mean, Benfica are asking for 120 for Enzo, and
Gosh, yeah, it's
Dortmund
ridiculous.
are kind of doing the same for Jude. Um,
Yeah, at least 100 for Jude. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, sometimes clubs, if it's a one piece that you need, the one guy that'll put you over the top, then fine. But if you need a couple, it makes sense just buying like two or three players for that price instead of just one.
mhm.
But if it is the one guy that you need, then yeah, I get it then. But there's not many teams where we just need one guy to take us to the top.
Yep. And to kind of touch a little bit on West Ham, I mentioned it a little bit before. It does feel like Moyes is maybe being found out a little bit, and you start to worry a little bit more because they didn't have Skamaka this
Mhm.
game. That is worth saying, but that's really
Yeah,
the only piece that they were missing. Kerr has played kind of at right back when Sufal hasn't been available. Kerr wasn't necessarily great at center back here, but he is a German national. So I don't necessarily know if that's necessarily the problem. I mean, they keep playing Dawson, so they don't have Ogbonna anymore, and I guess they didn't have Zuma for an injury reason. So maybe that'll help, but it does feel like they're not good at it. They're not as good as in past years at keeping clean sheets. And the Rice Suchek double pivot, I think, is becoming stale. They're not turning the ball over, and they're not good enough on the ball themselves for that to just constantly be the lineup. I don't know.
yeah.
What are your
And
thoughts?
Antonio's just running out of gas or something. I don't know. He's like half the player he was last year. And
Yeah.
I mean, Bowen was bright at times in this game. He got the PK. But if you looked at Bowen's stats last year, bunch of goals, bunch of assists. So those are kind of down this year. And then Paqueta has been, some games he's really good. I think he still needs to get used to life in the Premier League, just a little bit more time. But it's starting to feel like maybe they don't have that much time. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean the hot seat is heating up for Moyes because I mean if you just on paper you look at their front four, it's a really good front four. They should be much higher up in the table than where they are. But and the left side of the defense pretty good. Cresswell, Kerr, I'm great there. It's the right half that is a little iffy. Dawson especially. Sufal can be good in some games, but
Hmm.
I don't know. Obama was on the bench and didn't play, so maybe Dawson's just he's been playing a lot. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Kind of confusing though.
Hmm. So yeah, worrying at times a little bit, and they turn around and get get Brentford. And so we'll see what that is on Friday. I mean, you think about if Dawson plays again, you think of Tony and Embremo running at him. That's probably going to favor them. But we'll
Yeah,
see. But we'll see. Quick
we'll see.
quick
Yeah,
turnaround, and things can change. We'll move on to Leicester and Newcastle. And this one goes with Newcastle winning 3-0. Chris Wood with the PK. Miguel Almiron gets another goal. Continues to have a really good start to his season. That's another kind of storyline that maybe people would have forgotten during the World Cup. And no, Miguel Almiron is still lighting it up. And then Joe Linton was able to get a third with a header off a corner kick. Um, to touch on a little bit on Leicester first is I remember Leicester were one of the few teams that was actually on a really good, somewhat pretty good stretch of form after being absolutely dreadful, and then it just felt like the World Cup came at the worst time, and they didn't have Jamie Madison
yeah,
today. That maybe factored in a little bit, but really it was just Route Phase and Amity basically looked like they had a bit of a break, and they hadn't played in a while, and I think that showed up as well.
yeah. I think so too. But oh man, I mean Newcastle's on fire. And Ben, I was looking at their schedule. Do you want to take a guess on when their last loss was? And this is including. I mean they played
I
they
know
played
it.
two friendlies
I know
over the World Cup.
I know who it is. And it
Oh
was
yeah, you know who it is.
and it was a bit
Yeah,
of a
Liverpool.
honestly, it was a bit of a fluke loss. I mean, Ishtak scored, and he was a kneecap offside from being offsides and that counting. And then Fabio Carvalho scored, basically a bit of a volley from close range, but scored in like the 90th plus 8 minute. They got World Cup time in that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, so they haven't lost since August 31st. It's crazy. Some draws in there and a PK shootout if you're counting EFL Cup. But I mean, it's crazy. And I mean, they're a scary team. Arsenal, they're playing them soon. I'm really worried. I mean, this could be a team that threatens everything. Threatens the usual top four. They already are. So I don't know. And they got a lot of money. We have January coming up, so we don't know what reinforcements are going to come in, and they haven't necessarily been healthy. It seems like if they have Isaac, then they don't have Saint Maximin. If they have Saint Maximin, then they don't have Isaac. So
Yep.
they got some options when they're healthy too. So I don't know. It's worrisome. I mean, I'm glad to see Newcastle doing well. I just wish it wasn't, just because their owners are Saudi billionaires and can inject cash, you know, at will into the club.
And if I guess it'll depend on the player, especially if two clubs bid. If Enzo Fernandez wants to forego, because I think Benfica are still in Champions League, forgo Champions League for like basically 6 months, because it feels like in Newcastle could be the team to actually get him. And a midfield of Bruno Guimaraes and Enzo basically being able to rotate between being a 6 and an 8. That to me, that would make them, with Joe Linton being able to kind of bomb forward as well. That to me would be the best midfield in the league,
Yeah.
even over
Ooh.
City. And it feels like they could do this. And
Yeah. Gosh. Ugh.
it is scary. I mean, I mentioned another team. I mentioned Arsenal kind of playing like Liverpool. Newcastle does as well. I mean, they win the ball back in the final third higher than anyone else, or more often in the final third than anyone else. They press like mad. And all three of the front players. Now maybe when some Maxian plays, this will be different. But all three of the front players work super hard without the ball. I mean, Almiron will basically become their right back if Trippier is out of position. He'll run all the way back. Joe Linton will do the same. There's a lot
Yeah.
of selfless running and working. And another thing too is, uh, like you mentioned, they're not fully healthy yet. So no Callum Wilson in this game as well.
Yeah.
And the ice check.
Yeah, and we probably haven't even seen like the heights that Gamaris can offer either. So like he's probably going to get even better as well. And we didn't even mention like Trippier, who is amazing, and then Pope at the back. So
Yeah.
it's a scary team, and now we know about the attacking talent, but their defense is playing pretty well. They're starting to get they've been getting clean sheets all season.
Well, it just feels like you can't counter on them, or like that. That's kind of the reason why it's so good to work without the ball. Is you can maybe stop some of that transition stuff with all that running. But another thing too, and I think this is really the main reason why they're so dangerous, is they only have to play once a week. They can do this. They've got good legs in the squad. No one's really, other than Trippier, no one's really in that over 30 range. And you mentioned Bruno Guimaraes. Bruno, he's playing as their 6, but he's got a little freedom to go up, and he had a fantastic assist to Miguel Almiron for that second goal. If people didn't see it, just the way to pass, the quick the quick thought in his head, just the one time a through ball, and it's just there's a lot of potential still for this team to even be better. Now,
Mhm.
so we don't really know what to think of Newcastle at the moment, because in some cases they're pushing way above their weight. I don't know how long Miguel Almiron will be Mohamed Salah from
Yeah,
2017.
that's true.
Um, but at the same time, it's working now, and we keep waiting for them to kind of step up, and they don't. The one thing I will say is their passing numbers aren't maybe where you would want them to be. I think it was
Yeah.
288, 282 in this game. It was 74% accuracy, but it was 92 passes in the second half.
Ugh.
That's where someone like adding Enzo Fernandez to be a controller in that side would completely change that, and that's what would make them super dangerous.
Only 39% possession too. So yeah, I mean it's weird that it's weird that their passing isn't higher, but maybe it's just proof that they can kind of play on the break, play on the counter, I guess.
Yep.
Um, because what's all that possession worth if you can't score? Which is part of Leicester's problem this season for sure.
Yeah, That's a really good point to kind of to transition to Leicester. It feels like Brendan Rodgers is basically he's all about winning the midfield battle, and the one negative to that is it doesn't necessarily matter if you're conceding, especially if you're conceding on set pieces. That was another thing that
Yeah.
happened. I mean, no Madison, so it was always going to be a hard go when they were on the ball. I mean, they did create a couple chances. Patson Daka had a was a through on goal and couldn't beat Pope, and that's another thing too. Like when you do get past Newcastle's line, you have Nick Pope to battle with. Um,
Yeah.
and I think another thing too was it hasn't necessarily showed up yet, but they are missing. Leicester are very thin at fullback right now. Brian Bertrand maybe is about to retire. We haven't seen him for basically a year. Um, and Pereira has been out for a little bit, and James Justin has an Achilles injury, and he's likely out for the rest of the season. And so you're going to rely on Luke Thomas and Castagne and basically ride on them. And Castagne can do the job, but Luke Thomas is still kind of young, and sometimes he's good. In this game, Miguel Almiron just kind of ate him for lunch.
Yeah, and the weird thing too is this was Leicester was kind of it was unlucky to have the World Cup break because they were starting to put together
Yeah,
some form after just a dreadful start. They only lost to City 1-0 at the end of October, and then they beat Everton and they beat West Ham. So they were starting to put together a little bit of run, and now they come out of the gates with Newcastle and Liverpool. So they have Fulham Tuesday, January 3rd. A little bit of respite, but yeah, it was kind of. We talked about maybe the World Cup break coming at the right time for some of these clubs. It definitely came at the wrong time for Leicester, I think.
definitely. Yeah, and you mentioned Liverpool, and they do play Friday. It was almost a year ago that they actually beat Liverpool, and it was basically the last time Liverpool lost until that Madrid game.
Oh
And
yeah.
hopefully they remember Salah missed a PK in that game, which sucked. Uh, but yeah, it was honestly a lot of this was their own doing. I mean, it started with 2 minutes where they gave away the PK, but before the PK, where Emerty just kind of brings down Joe Linton. Ward has the ball. He takes forever on it, and then he just throws it to the side to Faze. There's nothing for Faze to do because Wood is starting to pressure him, and Faze has a terrible ball to Sumari, and Sumari turns it over, and that's how Newcastle basically win the ball, and that's the reason why the PK happens. It was just poor all around.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And they're prone to a lot of that, unfortunately, for them.
Yeah, for Leicester's sake, that is unfortunate because Faze we had been praising him a little bit, and he had been one of the better players at least on the ball. But again, a break you can maybe allow for that. But hopefully he
Yeah,
doesn't
he's
continue.
been good. Yeah,
Uh,
he's been one of the good players on defense. They it was like an emergency signing too because
yep.
Fofana left,
hmm
and we thought maybe they might be grasping at straws, but it actually ended up being a really good signing. This was like obviously one of the poorer games that he's had for Leicester, but I think it's just like one and off. He's been pretty good, and
I agree.
they were trying to get some clean sheets too finally, and I think he was a big part of that.
hmm And so we'll move on to Man City and Leeds. Man City they end up winning, I guess, 3 to 1. It was such a weird game because it felt like it was just a matter of time. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't end up panning out, but in this case, it did. The first goal from Rodri, it's basically a tap in after Melia saved a Mahrez goal. And then Holland gets his first of two. It's another tap in, but by Grealish. Basically, I think it's Liam Keeper just completely passed the ball straight to Grealish, and then Grealish just is able to do the FIFA goal. He runs all the way over, and then when the keeper comes to him, he squares it. And then Holland with a putback, another assist for Grealish. Grealish had an interesting game. We'll definitely get into that as well because he had a little bit of everything in this game, but he did end up with two assists, and this is a really good finish by Holland. So I think to maybe touch on Man City first. It was a wild lineup that Pep went with. So he started with
Yeah.
he had Cancelo available. He had Foden available, and he opted for Rico Lewis, this 18-year-old kid, and then the back three or the remaining back four was John Stones, Akanji, and Ake. But what was really weird is it was almost a back three in possession, and Rico Lewis was basically playing in midfield, and he was next to Rodri, and
Yeah, it
What
was
what
super weird.
what made this really good was Leeds just had absolutely no response to it. They were not able to press with enough numbers. Anytime, if you want to cover Lewis, Roger was open, or Gunnigan, and Leeds were really struggling with that. But another thing that was interesting was it was interesting to see Grealish get a start, and I think we saw a little bit why he hasn't necessarily played a ton, because while he did get the 2 assists, he also he had a bit of a nightmare in that first half.
A couple bad misses. Well, most noticeably that set piece routine where I think honestly, I think the ball bobbled a little bit,
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
everyone was on the same page, and Grealish was kind of like, "Wait, I didn't know that was supposed to come to me," and it was like, "You're the only one on the team that didn't know the ball was coming to you."
And I think he had a couple misses even after that. I mean, with Leeds' sake, you can see what maybe Marsh was trying to do. He set up in a 4-3-3. But the issue really was with Aronson, Rodrigo, and Nato. You didn't really have a threat to go in behind and really getting behind their back line. I mean, the midfield three was Greenwood, Roca, and Forshaw. They were good at keeping congestion and making it difficult, but you didn't really see any quality in there. I think they did miss Tyler Adams. Tyler Adams was suspended.
Yeah,
Um, but with and one thing that was another thing that showed up was in that first half, at least for the majority of that first half, they kept their fullbacks back. And so really it was kind of a block, and they were just defending in their own area. And that allowed Man City to basically, live inside their part of the part of the field. But it wasn't
oh
until
yeah,
Christensen tried to go forward where they conceded. And I think it's before. I understand trying to maybe get some momentum before halftime. Maybe you can catch them kind of
yeah,
sleeping a little bit. But what happened was they were caught sleeping. Christensen went forward, and with that, once Gundogan was able to bring the ball down and I think he beat Roker, kind of charging at him. There was all this space for Kevin De Bruyne to run all the way up, and you hadn't seen that all game. And that was
yeah,
after De Bruyne found Rodri with Mahrez. Yeah, they just conceded kind of a cheap goal right before halftime, and really after that,
yeah.
it was what was the number going to be? To be honest,
Mhm. Yeah, that was a bad backbreaker for sure, and you could kind of feel it coming, but
you could.
obviously to be so close to 0-0 at half, and then give up that goal against a really superior team with a lot more possession, yeah, it was always going to be tough. The mood in the locker room, I'm sure, kind of completely different. It's 0-0 versus 1-0, and then I do think they did miss Adams, and
Yeah,
part of like the appeal of Roca and Adams is they're so good defensively in that midfield that they take a little bit of pressure off the back four because just the back four is not the best. I don't have faith really in any of those players. I mean,
no,
Stroik scored, but he kind of made a mess out of some clears and just defensively, he made a mess out of things. And I don't have much faith in the back four. So you take out Adams and it's just Roca. It was always going to be tough, especially that defense just isn't great. Um, and Man City, you could just feel it coming. You could feel things coming, even if it
yeah, because
was zero
Melee was
zero at half.
making a couple really good
Hmm.
saves. He made a good save on
Oh, he was
Holland. I think he made
amazing.
a really good save on
Hmm.
Gunnigan even before that.
Oh
You're
yeah,
you're right. They were. It did feel just all it took was one before the floodgates were going to open. I mean, they had 29
yeah,
shots. And it just that's kind of the thing to playing Man City is
yeah,
you have to stop them from getting that first goal, because once you do that, then all that goofy stuff that Pep does to keep possession really does hurt you, because then you have to chase the ball and you can't win it, and then the legs go, and then that's
oh
how you're
yeah,
able to get the easy ones. Um,
yeah. Leeds need Bamford too. He had another setback over the World Cup. So I don't even know if this guy can get. I don't know if he can get healthy or stay healthy.
I'm worried
But
about him.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah, I do. And if they had him, we saw when he's healthy, like Leeds, he scores, and Leeds are a different team.
and he'll make runs. He'll make runs from
So
behind.
mhm,
The way Man City were
yeah,
playing is like Nathan Ake and Stones were basically they were inside the 50-yard line. In that first half, and Leeds didn't have a way to push them back. They didn't have any kind of way to have someone make a run to behind them, because Ake is faster than Aronson. Rodrigo isn't that kind of player either. I honestly feel like they if Bamford isn't going to be able to go, they need to play Joe Gerhardt more. If anything,
Maybe, yeah.
he can kind of offer at least something. Or Somerville. It was interesting to not see Somerville
Hmm.
get a start after he was on really good form for them
Yeah,
before the
I think
break.
they said he picked up a knock, a
Okay,
little one.
that makes sense.
I thought I heard that. Maybe not, but I thought I heard that. Um, but yeah, I mean, the front three, no one's gonna win a header in the box. Bamford would, but so you're limiting what you can do when you can't really like cross to a player's head. No one's gonna win anything up top. Certainly not Aronson or not Nato. So they're creators, sure, but you got to have that like centerpiece striker.
And the problem
That'll just if they get that, it'll help Aronson, it'll help Rodrigo, help everyone in the attack.
And the problem with creators is usually you need runners in front of you to create. And the reason
Right.
why Aronson wasn't really working, at least in that first half, was they weren't allowed to have Christensen make a run, because if you lost the ball, then basically we saw what happened. Saw it happen on the goal. And Christensen, to his credit, was good at staying back until that moment. Um, but and yeah, I think you mentioned that the center backs. I guess we'll stick a little bit on lead still is I do feel like Marsh should be concerned about his job, to be honest. It's not the easiest way to start the break with Man City and then Newcastle, but you have to remember how they ended the World Cup. They had like a 2-goal lead versus Spurs and ended up losing that game. And it's just
Mhm.
in some cases I don't really know what Marsh can do, because you mentioned the center backs, and the back line really is the issue. Leeds have given up more goals than anyone over the calendar year. And it's you when you see the defending and the options, you see why. I mean, Liam Cooper's supposed to be their
Yeah.
talisman, and he straight gave the ball away for that second goal.
Mhm. And you're right too with like the scoring is there. They have 23 goals. They have more goals than Chelsea. Chelsea only have 19. So the scoring is there. It's just that defense and I mean maybe they can do something in January because if you and I are sitting here from our living rooms looking
Nope.
at the Leeds club know that they have to they have to go out and get someone. Hopefully for Marsh's sake they'll go out and get a solid defender because I don't like anyone in the back four that started. And I don't like anyone. Maybe I mean Stroik on his day, sure, but other than that, it's not good. They got to improve there. And January's coming up, and everything's so tight. I think they do need to pull the trigger on a solid defender.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because if they don't, whether they get rid of Marsh or not, I don't like their trajectory. I mean, to touch on Man City, his 20 goals for Holland in December,
Unbelievable.
he was able to do that. It's weird because I think both of us we had him as competing for the Golden Boot. You might have even said it. I think I said Salah. Um, but it's just it makes sense this is happening, as crazy as that is to say, because every stage in his career he scored a goal a game, and whether from youth to I think he scored like 9 goals for his youth Norway team. He scored in the Champions League when he was playing at Shakhtar. I mean, not Shakhtar, playing at Salzburg, and he scored a goal a game when he was at Dortmund. And so I guess maybe people thought there was such a thing as a Dortmund tax or Bundesliga tax. He scores a goal a game when he plays in the Champions League. But another thing too is it's just such a perfect marriage that he's got endless supply chain, and he's even talked about that. It's just it's so different where he can have a mess here and there, and he doesn't care because he knows he's going to get 10 more chances. And the
Yeah,
way
I
that
mean, he could have scored like five in this one, and he comes away, probably thinking he should have buried more, and it's still a brace. It's amazing.
I mean, it's scary because Salah won the Golden Boot last year with 24 goals, and it's possible that Holland will get that before the before the end of the new year. Um,
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm looking. He has almost as many goals as Wolves and Nottingham Forest combined. They have 21, so he's almost outscored two teams combined. I mean, Southampton has only scored 10 or 14 goals, so he scored more than like West Ham. He scored more than Southampton. It's crazy. I think I'm starting to just embrace it because I don't know if we'll ever see like a free scoring season like this. I mean, unless it's Holland again.
I mean, well, it's the mix of him joining City, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a fantastic finisher by himself, but I mean, the main thing is just it's just the endless creation. He's got midfield players that can just do things that just no one else really has. You have fullbacks that can do that when Cancelo plays, and
yeah.
then Kevin De Bruyne. But it's just it's worth saying this. The record for most goals in a season, I think, is Salah with 32, and it's hard for me to not think Holland's probably going to pass that before the end of February, or, or
Crazy.
or at least or at least in March. And you're right. I mean, this is a historic season, and it's long days from that Copa, from that Community Shield game when a lot of people were kind
Yeah.
of kind of having fun with him.
Hmm.
By missing a few chances, it's just you're right. It feels like this is quite repeatable too, because a lot of these are really just
Yeah.
kind of tap-ins. It's
It's like you
easy.
could just turn
It's
around and do
easy
it
for
next
him.
year.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The only
Hmm.
issue will
Hmm.
be just kind of maintaining his fitness because
Yeah.
he's so big. You wonder how long can his joints kind of handle that, but that's going into the weeds. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good call though. That could be one of the potential weaknesses. Is he did kind of have a beat up year at Dortmund last year, so maybe that's one of his kryptonite. Like that's the only thing though. Maybe his conversion rate could be better. But so maybe that's why I think he could just go ahead and beat himself from this year next year if he just has a little bit more a better conversion rate, then he'd score even more. It's
I,
crazy.
I mean, they're going to they're going to have to create basically a new profile player and basically call him the Holland. And basically, what that'll mean is someone that scores basically as many goals a game as he has touches, because he's almost that kind of player. He doesn't really
Crazy.
offer a whole lot. He's not really passing the ball much. He does have an assist or two. I think they even
Yeah.
mentioned maybe his goal was his first touch in the game. It's just wild. He's always able to get open. He's always looking to make a run off the shoulder, and just defenders are terrified of him. You just see it.
Yeah.
You can just watch it. Um,
Yeah. That combo of speed and size is scary.
but another thing too is, again, if you can kind of again, you can just focus on Holland. Um, Man City really do not have the creation on the wings. Grealish struggled a little bit in this game. Mara struggled in this game. They are able to kind of play inside, and we see that. But it does feel like sometimes Holland can be a little isolated a tad. And so, do I think the team that played yesterday can win the Champions League? I don't. However, I think if Julian Alvarez is added and they play Holland together, I do, and that's not
Hmm.
something I had thought about before. But especially with Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne being able to play, um, it's one of it would be too hard for me to kind of see how you would stop that, because Alvarez will make those runs that'll make force people to get off of Holland. And
It's
it's
true.
something they just haven't had this entire season. So it's crazy,
Yeah.
as crazy as it is to say. There's a lot of ways to make the City team even better.
Yeah, because Alvarez had a really good World Cup after not really playing that much for City. So yeah, and I mean, they got Lewis can play now. We know that, and they can kind of play. I mean, they're playing Akanji at center back, and they're playing Ake as a fullback. So I mean, it's just insane. Um, I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be tough to beat them.
Yeah, and we'll see coming up, because they do have Arsenal do have a 5 point lead over City, but they haven't played City yet, and
Yeah.
those two games, it's gonna require getting a draw. You would think. We'll move on to the other Manchester team, Manchester United and Forest. We'll kind of speed it up a little bit. Um, this one, frankly, it was good for United to get the result off after all the news basically before the game was about Ronaldo. What I guess that kind of makes sense. It was about his departure. But all the news, all the talk afterwards was about maybe the new face of the club in Marcus Rashford. But it gets off with Rashford getting the first goal. It's almost a training ground play for him. They basically did the kind of thing that we saw Grealish, Man City traffic Grealish, but Rashford was able to bury it. And then Martial gets the second. This is really all about Rashford, to be honest. Rashford, goes down the wing, he cuts inside, and has a really good through ball to or square ball to Martial, and Martial finishes. I do think Hennessy could do better, but yeah, that is what it is. And then Fred was able to get the third, and it's a really good pass by Casemiro. But the thing to touch on Man United was just Ten Hag went crazy with the lineup. He played
Yeah,
Wan-Bissaka. We hadn't seen Wan-Bissaka in a while. He played Varane, which kind of made sense. Varane back from World Cup, you'd understand. Maguire wasn't able to go. We don't know if he was feeling sick or whatnot. He was on the bench. He was able to come on a little bit towards the end. So that forced them to play Luke Shaw at center back, and then
yeah,
Malacia was the left back. But the reason why I want to bring that up is this was maybe a gettable Man United side, and Forest offered absolutely nothing this game.
yeah, yeah. Really, just didn't really just boring. A boring team to watch in this game. I mean, like you look at the attacking talent, and I mean, they really didn't do anything. I thought maybe Lingard would be fired up to kind of play against his former team, and
Yeah,
he
he
fell
he
flat.
struggled.
Um, yeah, he struggled mightily. I mean, Brennan Johnson at times had a little bit of I mean a threat. He looked threatening at times, I guess, but that was about it
Mhm.
for Nottingham Forest in the attacking phase.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on a little bit on at least United. It, I think it's fantastic for Marcus Rashford to have this little revival. Now I don't necessarily know if it is Ronaldo leaving, but I do think him and Martial are really good together. I've seen that in a couple of the Europa games where there was one in particular where they were losing to a team that Mix gets screwed plays on. I don't actually know the team, but it was a club I'd never even heard of before, and they came on and they both after halftime and both got goals. It's just they know each other. It's when Rashford wants to cut inside, Martial will go outside. It just feels that that's a good pairing together. And
I think
again,
so.
all the talk before was about Ronaldo leaving. All the talk even after that was maybe United were trying to get Cody Gakpo. And
They
it
were.
looks like they were missed out on that. And Rashford kind of just silenced all of that.
Yeah, and I really think I don't know. I don't want to blow like too much smoke, but I really think Ten Hag's done a really good job, and he's been really gutsy in the decision making, and it's paid off. I mean,
Hmm.
I like the fact. I mean, obviously, after Ronaldo kind of like goes on Piers Morgan and talks about the club badly, you have to get rid of him. But it was a big decision not to start him, and they played better without him. So that kind of, I think that just gives the belief in the team that our manager knows what he's doing, and he can make the call against a legend like Ronaldo,
Hmm.
and say, hey, we don't want you at the club. We're better without you. And this guy is still he scored like 26 goals last year. So it was a gutsy decision, and it was the right call. And he also made the decision to stop starting Maguire, which is another. It looks for us we were begging for him not to play Maguire, but he was the club captain, so it took some courage to not start him as well. And I think United has benefited for it, and he's made some tough calls. He's made some big calls in his first year in charge, and I think he's got the club moving in the right direction. I really do. They
Yeah.
made some good signings, and he doesn't like Van de Beek played. He's not freezing out players, like Ragnick kind of did. Van de Beek never played, so
Hmm.
maybe developing a little bit more depth there too. I like what he's done. I think he's a good coach. I thought he was a good coach at Ajax. Didn't know how he'd do in the Premier League, but he seems to be settling down very nicely.
Yeah, I mean they're only 1 point off of Spurs, and if they play the same games played, if they just get a draw, they're even with Spurs. If they win that game in hand, they go in front. And this entire time I've been actually looking. I've just only been looking at Spurs as who Liverpool need to worry about. Because you figure maybe eventually Brighton, who's right behind them, will kind of falter. Though that hasn't
Yeah.
them under the Zerbi has started to catch fire. But
Mhm.
United are right there, and you keep forgetting about them. And you're right. The job he's come into, it was not an easy job. to
Yeah,
come into, and
definitely not.
he's got United where they want to be from this point on. And
I
now
think
is
so. Yeah.
when he needs to be kind of judged. But he's done a very good job to get them there. But another thing too is just you mentioned how he's been giving people shots, or yes, it hasn't been being freezing out players. And another guy to kind of talk about is Alejandro Garnacho. Came on in the second half, and it seems anytime he comes on, he continues to impress.
Yeah. He immediately like almost scored, I think, or got an assist. I can't remember, but immediately threatening. And yeah, he's someone that we thought might have maybe been snubbed by not making his World Cup roster. But it looks like he will in 3.5 years for sure. And he's another really good player, another young guy. Alanga's another young guy too.
Yep,
I mean, he's played a little bit
good
more
point.
than Garnacho in the past, but he's another young player, and he got on and looked pretty threatening as well. So starting to get a little bit of depth. I know they don't have any depth at center back. That's one of the problems. But other than that, they're starting to get some good depth in there. Maybe striker now too, with Ronaldo being gone. But
Yep.
these are things that I think they're going to be looking at solving in the January window for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand why they would be interested in someone like Gakpo, because it feels like Rashford can actually he's gotten to a point where he can play both left wing and right wing. I used to think he was only a one sided player. Maybe that has to do with him just being a healthier again. He had a couple injuries kind of in a row, maybe a season or two ago.
Yeah,
So that maybe, yeah, because he has his pace again. I mean, the way he cuts violently again. And
he looks confident.
he's
Yeah.
always had a good shot on him. But
Oh yeah.
you're able to kind of rotate him a little bit more. And that it allows you to play Garnacho, but you mentioned Alanga. They also have this youngster Palestri, who
Oh yeah.
played in the League Cup game. So
Hmm.
it does like the way Alex has always talked about the youth. And maybe he knew something that we didn't. Um,
Yeah.
another thing to talk about is they do have the Brazil midfield, Casemiro and Fred,
Oh yeah.
and
Casemiro's been huge.
this was finally the first game where you actually saw that really work out. I mean, Fred came on and he looked a different player to me. He's another guy that maybe has a new bout of confidence or whatever. But not just the goal he had, just the way he was running and pressing, but he was good on the ball as well. He looked
Yeah.
comfortable on it. And he was making good decisions, and
Yeah. He looked a different player.
he really did. And that's another player to maybe think about going forward, and that'll definitely help because Fred's always had legs. He's always been a good DM. Just as this year has been, he can be got at maybe being pressed. If he can get that out, he becomes a completely different player.
Yeah, and Casemiro helps them out there too. And when they signed Casemiro, I thought really good signing for now. But he's kind of older. How will that fare in the future? And I think it's going to fare pretty well because if he helps Fred out and Fred gets better, Casemiro, you don't have to necessarily play him in a couple of years. You don't have to play him all the time. Maybe you just be a really solid influence in the locker room, in a kind of off the bench kind of guy even. So
Yeah,
that's another great signing. Anthony was a good signing, I think. He's a little one way. He needs to develop other skills, but
I agree.
he's a proper player too. That have and Malasia too. All signed by Ten Hag, and they're playing pretty well. For first timers, they're playing well, and a lot of young guys too.
And to touch on Forrest, um, we keep waiting for Cooper to kind of get the lineup right. Now they were missing Gibbs White, so maybe that kind of showed up a little bit. He'd been kind of maybe the best player before the break. They tried playing Lingard there. That you mentioned that didn't really work. But at the same time, it also we keep waiting for him to get the lineup right, and it feels like he's still kind of experimenting a little bit. And time is now. The
Yeah.
time to experiment was before Christmas. Now, are you worried about Forest now? Still.
Yeah, I am because I mean I thought maybe they would get that talent together enough to avoid the bump and stay in the Premier League, but
Mhm.
I mean it just seems like every game it's not just like one player is different. It's like a bunch of players are in and out of this lineup.
Yeah,
And it really does feel like Steve Cooper doesn't know his best 11, and I think that's now it's starting to really hurt them because they just don't have any consistency playing with each other because every game, it's like three, four, five different people are in and out. It's hard to get stability. I do think maybe this back four might be the back four finally that we're going to see going forward. But
Yeah,
other than
yeah.
that,
I
I'm
like
just
the.
very confused about who's going to play. It's tough. It's tough to like get consistency when you're playing with different guys every game.
Mhm. Yeah, we don't have the McKenna and was it Cook? Kind of disaster class.
Yeah,
Bali
Cook.
does Butler looks better. To me, Whirl actually didn't look too bad, and Lodi actually didn't look too bad. So
Yeah,
and
Lodi solid.
Oya is decent. So you're right. I do think that's a decent enough. That's decent enough back line to maybe not
Yeah,
get rid. That's better than what Leeds have.
decent enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. Or yeah, maybe better than what Leicester have too.
Yeah. And then behind I guess I don't know if Henderson was hurt or not. I mean, I think he's. I don't think
We
he's.
couldn't play. Yeah,
Is
he
he
was.
is he a lone player still? I thought he was sold.
Yeah, so he's not. Yeah,
Oh,
I don't. Yeah, it's a loan. It's a loan because
okay,
I don't know. It was in his clause that he couldn't play his parent club, so that's why.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
but I
Okay,
thought he was sold too. But who
yeah,
knows?
because I mean, I did feel Hennessy could have maybe done a little bit better, and who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe if that Martial goal, it's only 1-0. Maybe that Bowley chance that went in, it was just unlucky to be offsides. Maybe it's 1-1 at halftime.
yeah,
Maybe things are
yeah. Who
different.
knows?
Um,
Maybe a 2-1, 2-1 too. Who knows what happens?
yeah, but
Because it's game on at that point.
because goals do change games. But
Oh yeah,
frankly, I'm kind of surprised he doesn't play Potter more, Lewis Potter more, or
Wait,
is that his name? It's something Lewis.
Lewis
Um,
O'Brien.
Lewis
Yeah,
O'Brien. There we go. Potter's on Brentford. Um, because when he comes on, he seems to be like basically the guy that creates things. He has really good passes into the box, and it seems like that's sometimes what they suffer. But another thing too is I think Emmanuel Dennis is the best striker, and
me
it seems
too. Yeah,
he's
I
just
want to
not
see more of him.
he's not being played enough.
Yeah, as soon as he came on, he looked more threatening than anything else they had for sure.
Yeah,
And I mean, we know what he can do in the Premier League with Watford. He had a ridiculous season a couple years ago, and last season he had a good season too. So I agree, Ben. I think this is someone that needs to be playing more, especially like Surridge just has had an awful season. He just has no confidence. I would just play Dennis up there. I mean, you still have options too, but no one can get like game minutes, like solid game minutes, and get into a rhythm because, I
yeah,
mean, you would think like Owoni would score 10 goals, but he can't get games all the time up top. Lingard, Johnson, they can't get games all the time. So it just seems like everyone's kind of disjointed, and they're just not used to playing with each other and a solid starting 11. You can't just rotate it all the time. I mean, a little bit, yeah, that's great, but four or five different players every game, it's going to be disjointed. They just don't look like they're used to playing together.
and it sounds like at least the way the announcing was talking about, they could be in the market to bring in more players. So I guess we'll have to follow that. Yeah, I don't know.
Ugh,
We'll see. I mean, I've for a while I actually thought that eventually Cooper would get it right, and that Forrest
me
would
too.
be one of those three. Now I'm not so
Yeah,
sure. I'm
yeah, same here.
maybe second guessing that. All right, we'll
Just
move
all,
on.
with all that talent, they would eventually figure it out.
Yeah, and we'll move on to Liverpool and Aston Villa. This was a very good Boxing Day present for me. With Liverpool winning 3-1. It was not not necessarily the easiest game in the world though. The game was a lot closer than the score. Got off with a solid getting a first goal. And basically it's just off a corner kick, and Liverpool keep possession. The reason I want to talk about this is the ball that Trent Alexander-Arnold plays to Robertson is fantastic. It's like
Amazing, yeah.
outside the boot,
Outside
boot,
the foot.
boot flick, and he gets it all over everyone. Goes to Robinson, and then Robinson hits it first time to Salah. And what's funny is everyone knows about Alexander Arnold and how great his delivery is and the number of assists that he has. And it's Robertson that actually has the most assists ever for a defender.
Yeah,
With that assist, he passed Leighton Baines, and so Liverpool have had, Liverpool's two fullbacks are one in maybe three on that list, which is really wild. Um,
I'm just glad you recognize the quality ball from TAA because Like you said, he didn't get on the score sheet, but he certainly deserved to be on the score sheet
And
with
he's good.
that ball that set up everything. It set up Robertson's assist. In hockey, that would be an assist, actually. But I think he deserves
Ooh.
something. So I'm glad you mentioned it because that was fantastic. That Katie actually, I went to the bathroom and Katie paused it because she was like, "You have to see this goal." And when I came back, I was like, "Wow!" I know Trent isn't going to get the assist, but that was a brilliant ball.
Yeah, because it completely fooled everyone, and the way to do it outside the boot, as well. That's not an easy thing to do.
Mm-mm.
Um, and then they're able to get a second, also from a corner kick. I think Villa defend the first bit, but the rebound like goes Mo Salah. Mo Salah just kind of taps it to Van Dijk, and Van Dijk hits it first time, and gets a little luck. I think there's a deflection that goes in, but first two goals and the first two off corner kicks, and for the most part, at this point, it did seem like it was relatively comfortable, and then out of nowhere, Villa really woke up, and this was hectic as hell. Just they get the quality chances they made and the kind of misses they had were shocking. I mean, Bailey missed from close. Watkins had a header that was right to alley. Anything else that goes in. Watkins had another save. There was one chance where I think McGinn was close on goal and basically did the same thing, headed the ball to Allison. I think Watkins was in on goal, and Allison had a really good one-on-one save. Just Villa were creating chances, like very quality looks. This wasn't easy.
Yeah, yeah. They are certainly threatening an attack. They've got some pacey players. They've got some playmakers for sure. So they did kind of make things overall it looks more comfortable on the score line than it actually was. But on the day, it's just the difference in the striking quality. Like you said, Watkins, Bailey, they kind of missed some chances, and
Mhm.
Liverpool they bury them, and then that was the difference in this one for sure.
And to touch on the lineup, it was a typical 4-3-3, but the way that Oxlade-Chamberlain played, it was almost basically, and you saw this without the ball. And sometimes I want to get this out there. Sometimes when I do formations, I forget that teams play different formations whether you have the ball or not. It looks like a 4-4-2 without the ball, where Salah and Darwin were together, where Oxlade was a little bit more in midfield. Uh, at least in that second half, because Oxlade doesn't have the legs to kind of make those forward runs, so I guess he's more comfortable getting the ball in midfield. But I think one of the reasons why Liverpool were kind of struggling a little bit is the legs kind of gave out. I thought, Henderson, Fabinho, and Thiago are decent at least on the ball. Well, we'll say Thiago is. But those times where you can if you have transition moments or if you have to run back, they don't really have the legs to necessarily do that anymore. And so anytime Robinson and Trent are kind of caught out of position, there's an issue, and you kind of saw that a little bit. And so really, I think the game changed when Klopp made the subs, and he did something that he doesn't always do. And he doing it against Emery was kind of funny because usually Emery kind of does the early subs, but he took off Trent Alexander-Arnold for Gomez to basically he told Gomez do not make these runs forward, essentially. So that kind of limited any kind of threat that way. But another thing he
Oh
did was
yeah.
he took off Henderson for this young kid, Stefan Bacic, and he took
Mhm.
off Thiago for Naby Keita. And after that, Fabinho all of a sudden turned into a different player. But just Liverpool were able to kind of win the ball back a little bit more, and that kind of stayed the tide a little bit.
Yeah, good decisions, and I mean the young guy is one for the future for sure, and I'm glad he got a goal too,
Yep.
because he's good, and you've been talking about him. I remember you talking about him in past podcasts, so he's definitely one to look for in the future, and maybe he can help the depth issue going forward in the second half of the season, maybe.
To be honest, I have brought him up a couple of times, and it's just because when you look at Liverpool's academy in the past, or if you look at like their youth products when they've played in like these preseason games or these friendlies, uh, they've all looked kind of the same. I've made jokes about they could be Harry Potter characters. Bacic is a guy that actually does look different, but both with his body, but also on the ball. He just seems way more physical, and for being, I think he just turned 18 too, so he is very young. I mean, the touch he took to get around the keeper and to finish, that is veteran like. But another thing, he's just good on the ball. I mean, he's good at winning the ball back. And we keep mentioning they have an issue with midfield, and one thing that's funny is I think in a weird way it helped not having James Milner this game. James Milner got hurt
Hmm.
playing Man City. I don't think Klopp would have done this without if James Milner had been available. And
Right.
it was one of those things where it worked out in this case.
Yeah, it was awesome to see him, and I think you're right. I think Milner would probably have played, but now we might see Stefan play a little bit more.
I
Hopefully,
hope
a
so.
little bit more cameos off the bench. Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
so too.
Yeah, because I mean, again, they need legs in midfield now. They're going to get eventually Arthur back. That could help a little bit. It was good to see Keita back as well, and Keita looks
Mhm.
good.
He did. Yeah.
The issue is it's kind of the same thing with Liverpool. Everything rests on Thiago and Keita being fit and good to go. Because you don't have the creation when they have the ball, or you won't have the ability to win it back necessarily as much. Because
Right.
I think Henderson's legs actually really have gone. To be honest, he wasn't
Yeah.
able to go the full game. He looked okay, but again he had to be subbed after 60 minutes. And Fabinho looks a better player when he's got legs behind him. So you don't necessarily have to
Absolutely.
replace Fabinho. You just have to get better legs next to him. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And to touch a little bit on Darwin Nunes, he had a bit of a wild game. He didn't have the best game versus Man City as well. The World Cup came at a bad time, I guess, for him. He didn't necessarily have the best go at it with Ukraine or with Uruguay, but he was also kind of forced to play as a winger. I didn't think
Mhm.
they played him. The Uruguay coach played him best, but he's come
Yeah.
back and he's lacking confidence again. And you're kind of seeing that. You're seeing that with the poor attempts. You're seeing he's lashing at the ball. He's throwing goal in a couple of these, and he's just making rash decisions. And but to do to his credit, his running is opening things up for everyone else. And so he is helping the team even with him missing some chances here and there. But they get the third
Mhm.
goal because of him, and I think that's worth saying as well. Now he doesn't necessarily have the best touch when Gomez plays the ball over the top, but it's close enough where he's able to run onto it, and he gets a really hard cross that forces Olsen to kind of parry it away, and that's when Batches is able to kind of go behind him. And if it's not for Darwin Nunes, they don't score this goal. So that's worth saying as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because he can still, even if he's lacking confidence, not scoring, he can still be a threat and help out.
Right. And I mean, the reason why I mentioned, the Gagpo signing, why he was so needed, is just Oxlade-Chamberlain cannot play left wing, and neither can Fabio Carvalho because we saw that versus Man City. And so, as long as Jota and Luiz aren't going to be available, you're going to need someone else to offer at least a run ahead, but also be a creative outlet on that side high up. And Gakpo is kind of a unique player. He can kind of do that.
Mhm.
He's got enough creativity in him. He can maybe play in midfield, can kind of play as a 10 role, like we saw versus Holland, but or for the Netherlands. But the main thing is just he's got an insane shot on him. And so
Yeah.
he just that alone is going to it's going to force defenders to recognize that, and that'll open things up for others. So
Oh
hopefully
yeah.
hopefully this will work.
I think it will. And he had an amazing World Cup too, so he's full of confidence. You'd imagine.
Yep. And we'll kind of see if they do try to get a midfielder or not. We'll see. And then we'll move on to Southampton and Brighton. Let's see how we're doing for time. It's probably not great. Yeah, it's not great. Southampton and Brighton. This one ends 3-1. First goal from Alana, then Peru with an own goal. Solly Marsh gets the third, which we will talk about the third goal, and then James Ward-Prowse gets a goal that I have issues with, and I'll kind of get to that as well. Um, as far as Brighton lined up and kind of yeah, really no surprises. I mean, Veltman was maybe a surprise. Colwell got a start, and Colwell's starting to look good for them. Casado and Gross as the midfield pivot. No Alexis McAllister for this game. Marsh, Lallana, and Matoma with the front three with Trussard. And the thing to kind of touch on is Sully Marsh had himself a game.
Oh yeah.
It's his cross that Lallana gets a head on. The keeper Bazunu maybe could do better because it is kind of hit to him. But I don't know. It's coming kind of quick to him. But it's a good cross by Marsh nonetheless. The Perraud own goal happens because of Estupian getting the ball on the wing and crossing it in, and basically Peru had he didn't know what to do. I think he like tries to clear it and just kind of it deflects off him. But Marsh is on his back. If he doesn't do it, Marsh is going to get a tap in.
Yeah,
And then
I
for
think
the
so.
and then the third one is a special one because Sully Marsh turns into Cristiano Ronaldo from like his Real Madrid days. He just lashes it into the net from about 30 yards out with a screamer, and yeah, just quite a day for him.
Oh yeah, he was amazing. I'm glad to see it too because I think he deserves a little bit more credit than what he gets.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, someone tweeted uh, some trying to make a dig, being like, "Poor Alexis McAllister having to uh, having to leave, Messi and Alvarez and all these great players for Argentina, and having to go to Brighton." And he mentioned like Sully Marsh, and it's like, Sully Marsh
Eh,
isn't really the problem. Um,
yeah, yeah, I
and
agree completely.
and then they do get a goal back. The reason I kind of didn't like this is it's a PK. It's created by Samuel Aduzzi. Aduzzi was really the only player that showed up for Southampton. So that's worth
Mm.
saying. He had a couple. He actually had a chance to maybe score earlier. And he's young, so you can kind of live with that. But he draws the PK, and then Roy Prowse kind of takes it, and it's saved. And then the ball goes to him, and he heads it in. I don't like the fact that the first player uh, can take the ball after a spot kick. I would like that to maybe to be changed, but that's just me.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that.
Um, and I mean, for Southampton, how Southampton were bad. And it's not necessarily
Yeah.
good for Jones. I mean, they did have 14 shots. So that's what we're saying, but the possession was 34%. I actually watched this game. I didn't want to watch the. I mean, the Newcastle game was the one on USA, and there was just nothing going on in
No.
that one. Brighton were playing keep away. To be honest, Southampton just looked clueless. They didn't know how to win the ball back, and it was just really easy. I mean, Brighton had 590 passes with 87% accuracy. I mean, that's Arsenal numbers.
Yeah. Six. Well, yeah, it's crazy. But trouble for Southampton. We talked about it earlier too. I mean, I don't know. They look. I mean, they're always in this spot, and I don't know why would you fire the coach that always gets you out of this spot? I don't know. They could use that experience now. It feels like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of youth on this team. With it's kind of mixed because I
Yeah.
mean, Ward Prowse is a veteran, but again, the only guy that looked arsed in this game to me was a doozy. He was at least taking players on. He was being creative. But there was just no one else really offering anything. They were playing Che Adams as almost like a lone striker, and they weren't able to get him the ball.
Yeah.
There'd be like a I don't know a boot from like a Peru upfield, and the ball would just bounce and go to the keeper. Like I don't know what Che Adams is supposed to like do to stuff like that. It was just yeah, it was frustrating. I guess if you're a Southampton fan, and for
Yeah.
Brighton, it is funny how one thing I want to get at is it feels like under De Zerbi, they either do not net or when they score, it's never one. It's like 4 or 5 or 3. it's
It's true.
it's
I
it, it's
didn't
it's
think
it's
about
a high
that.
number, and this was another case.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Huh.
And we'll move on to Chelsea and Bournemouth. Chelsea win 2-0. Goals from Havertz and Mason Mount. It's a great strike from Mount from outside the box. And Mount had a good role for the first goal. It's his through ball to Sterling. Sterling is basically able to run in behind and squares it to Havertz. So Mount had a pretty good game. And really, one thing I want to say is this was almost a perfect game for Potter to kind of come back. He has Reece James back. Koulibaly was back. Dennis Zakaria was back to play in the lineup, and they all looked good. And
Mhm.
then Reece James looked like he had a setback with his knee or hamstring, and he's just gotten back from a long spell, anyways. And that usually is not a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Doesn't look good.
And you figure If whether he puts it off or not, he's going to need surgery, and if he needs surgery, that'll probably be his season. And so, in
Yeah,
that
you would
case,
imagine.
that completely changes Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea is so
Mhm.
much different when he plays.
Yeah, yeah, he's one of those like pivotal players for them,
Really is.
and yeah, we've been saying it when he's not there, they look completely different.
In fact, the thing I mentioned with Mitrovic and Tony, you could make a case, a legit case for Reece James, for Chelsea.
Mhm. Yeah, you
They are
could.
such a different team with him. Another thing to kind of say is Pulisic got to start. So we hadn't necessarily seen him, and I thought he actually looked pretty good. Him and Mason Mount have a pretty good connection together. So I don't know if we'll necessarily see more of that going forward, but it was good to kind of see.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too.
And then for Bournemouth, it's a weird game because they were just completely outclassed in that first half. I mean, the stats aren't really kind. The 40
Yeah,
percent possession. I did feel that they looked better in the second half. And it's the first game back with a manager. Uh, shoot, not Grant. Oh, I forget his name.
Neil. Yeah,
Neil.
Gary O'Neill.
Gary. That's right.
Yeah,
It's with him as official with the job, and they responded to him. He made it. He did make a couple changes. He kind of changed formations, and he brought on some players. He brought on Anthony and brought on this guy Dembele Sariki. And frankly, I thought they deserved a goal at least for their performance in the second half. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. They definitely played a lot better in the second half because the first half a little stale. But yeah, I would agree, Ben. It would have been nice to see them maybe get like a goal or something from that second half.
and I mean it's one of those things where I'd like to maybe see Anthony and this Sariki Dembele player a little bit more. I mean, we saw both of them
Yeah.
in, or I guess people that watched the game saw both of them in the uh, cup game versus Everton, a couple months ago, and it's just they both look really good on the ball, and it's maybe something that they're kind of lacking because it feels when Kiefer Moore plays, like the idea is just kind of get the ball, in the air for Moore or Solanke, and it seems very uh, predictable. Maybe is the word
Yeah,
you mentioned before, where
definitely, definitely.
these two players give him a little dynamicism to him.
Yeah, I think that would be a good plan going forward because they do play well off each other. It
Yep.
seemed like at least in the second half. So
And no Tavernier this game, and that actually maybe would have maybe did show up a little bit. I mean, they were on
yeah,
relatively decent form going before the World Cup, and so Bournemouth is actually one of those teams I think everyone pinned to go down after that Liverpool game, and the coach is I forget it. Is it Nathan? Shoot.
Neil,
Neil Jones.
Gary O'Neill.
Gary
Yeah.
O'Neill. Oh my God, I'm bad. He's done a fantastic job, and so I think he's earned this. I remember there were talks that they were looking at Beasley maybe coming
Really?
in,
Oh,
and
interesting.
another thing that's interesting is they do have new ownership, and one of the main main
Oh
guys
yeah,
of the ownership is Michael B. Jordan.
that's right.
That's kind of unique. Um,
Yeah, that was cool to see him in the stands
it
too.
was there, yeah. And so we'll move on to Everton and Wolves. This one ends in a heartbreak fashion for Everton, with Wolves getting the going ahead goal in basically the 95th minute by Ait Nouri. It starts off with Yeremini getting a goal in basically like the third minute, and the reason why that's important is they haven't had him since the Chelsea game, and maybe the one negative is they had to lose him a little bit in the second half, maybe for a hamstring issue,
Yeah,
and
concern.
that's the fear when someone has an injury is when you get back too early. This happened with Luis Diaz. Is if they try to get back too early, you can have a setback, and it makes it worse. Um,
Yeah. Oh yeah, it happens all the time. You just can't rush it, but it's hard when you like need points. You're in desperate need of points. You have to rush it sometimes. And yeah, you're right. It just ends up doing more harm than the injury did in the first place, the first time.
and he's the best player or best defender. I think
Yeah,
by far. I mean, a
definitely.
lot of people will talk
Yeah.
up Connor Cody and his leadership ability, or Tarkowski. No, Yeremina is their number one. Um, and but so they get the first goal, then they concede off a corner kick. So both goals were off corner kicks. but this one was unique. This was almost like a set piece, set play. I don't know if you saw this. So they go short to Neves. Neves like kicks it immediately to Moutinho, and then Moutinho takes a touch and then basically does it outside the boot flick, and it goes over everyone and it falls to Podence, and Podence kind of just like one times it. That was a pretty nice goal. And then
Nice finish. Yeah.
yeah, that Neuer goal though is the crusher, because what happens is it's like everyone's nightmare, essentially, or your team's nightmare, because Everton are trying to win the game. So you understand it. Stokowski goes long to Patterson, who is playing really high up the field. He's basically playing as their winger, and what happens is he tries to head the ball to Anthony Gordon. Gordon and the ball goes behind him. Max Kilman wins the ball back, and basically that allows a lot of space for Wolves to kind of break out into attack. Mateus Nunes gets the ball, and then he kicks the ball up for Adama Traore to run onto. And then it's just Adama versus Tarkowski. Tarkowski doesn't want to get anywhere close to him. And so Adama has a lot of time to just look up and wait for Ait Nouri to make his run into the box. Ait Nouri basically beats Patterson. He beats Patterson in a sprint. And yeah, I mean, the ball kind of just bounces to him, and he finishes it. I mean, it's one of those things where you understand why you're trying to push. You're trying to get that big 3 points, um, but you can't. You have to realize who's behind you. I mean,
Yeah.
the center back was
Absolutely.
it was Tarkowski, and it wasn't Cody. It might have been Holgate. But they
Yeah.
just
Oh, sorry. It was. Hold up. Let me look.
might have been
I have it
Godfrey.
pulled up.
Uh,
It was Tarkovsky and Mina, and then Godfrey came in for Mina.
that's it. Yeah, and they just you didn't necessarily have the pace behind that. So like anything, you have to remember that as a fullback. That's really
Absolutely.
that's the risk. And if you do make that run, you have to be able to track back. And I know I just beat him for pace.
Yeah. Cooked them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worrying for Everton. I mean, they actually played better than Wolves, to be honest. I mean, two big chances missed as well. Anthony Gordon was in on goal a couple of times. Neil Mopai was as well, and Joseph Sa had some really big saves. But Everton had majority of the ball, better passing. But again, it's all about getting cut open when you don't want it to.
But yeah, it was a huge win for Wolverhampton too. They desperately needed those 3 points. So I think maybe that could inject a little bit of life in them, and maybe they can climb out of the bottom three. Huge swing in points. Everton, kind of back in the relegation zone again. And if they'd gotten the 3 points, they're putting a little bit of distance between them. But just a massive game for sure for Wolves to be able to win against a team that's kind of possibly going to drop in that relegation zone and be battling with you for one of those spots. So it
Yeah.
was a huge win, and they actually scored more than one goal this time too. Wolverhampton.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, it's a fantastic start for Lopetegui. Another thing too is it looks like they've made some business with Atletico Madrid to pick up Mateus Cunha,
Ooh,
a Brazilian striker. I remember this guy actually being sought after, and it just didn't necessarily work at Madrid. But sometimes just
right.
all it takes is a change of scenery. So we'll kind of see
Yeah,
if that works out. They need a striker. All they have
they
is
do.
all they have is Diego Costa, and he can't go for more than 60, 70 minutes. So he looked pretty good
Yeah,
in this game. To be fair to him. Um,
yeah. I think this was his best game so far for Wolves.
but maybe the one negative for them is their back line with Nathan Collins and Kilman. It's not what it's been in the past. You don't have Ruben Saiz, you don't have Bowley back there, and I think it's like them. They're like number two after Leeds when it comes to conceding.
Ooh.
They're conceding a ton of goals when they used to be like one of the best
Yeah,
defenses.
yeah.
Um,
They didn't score, but they didn't concede.
yeah, and so that's something for Lopetegui to fix a little bit. I don't think it's Saw.
Yeah, that's
Saw that's
certainly
the
a
issue.
concern. No, he's been amazing. Yeah, it's probably that back four. Maybe some of the I mean, Nunez is a solid defensive mid, but it's probably on the back four, honestly.
And it is worry time for Lampard because that's three defeats now in a row. It's four if you include the 4-0 or the 4-2 blow or I want to say blowout, the 4-2 win versus Bournemouth, or loss versus Bournemouth in the cup game. They played Bournemouth like two games in a row. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that was weird.
A lot of these wins, it's not really competitive. I mean, this one, they lose at the very end, but they've either been scoreless. I think they were scoreless versus Fulham. That's maybe the last time they got some points. They've beaten 3-0 by Bournemouth. It's I think they were beaten 2-0 by Spurs. It hasn't been good for Lampard.
No, yeah, and he's definitely on the hot seat as well.
And we'll move on to Crystal Palace and Fulham to kind of wrap things up. Um, it's funny because Fulham win 3-0. You don't want to necessarily slight Palace because Palace have done a good job to this point in the season. I think Patrick Vieira is a pretty good coach. Actually, I've tipped him maybe for a U.S. job. Um,
Hmm,
and
I wish.
this is just one of those where Palace didn't necessarily show up. Some of that was kind of on just misfortune. James Tompkins didn't play his first game until it was his first game since last Boxing Day. First game in a
God,
year, and you saw
wow.
why. he
Yeah.
got he got an early yellow card just doing something stupid on I think it's Mitrovic, and then that later shows up by doing something stupid on Mitrovic again. But it starts off really in about the 30th minute when Tyreek Mitchell he tries to chest the ball down, and it's just too hard for him. And then he tries to win the ball back. He tries to lunge it, and he just basically he lands, or his foot basically goes all the way on um, Tete's leg. And it's high up. It's stud showing. It's a straight red. And
Mm,
so down hurt at that point. They get the Fulham get the first goal by Mitrovic, had it being the provider. It's a really good ball sent in by him, and Bobby Reed's able to get on. And then after that, really, it was just what was the number going to be.
yeah.
It was 1-0. It was 1-0 at halftime. This game wasn't really that different between the two sides. And then Tompkins gets a second yellow by he has his hand up, and it basically Mitrovic kind of runs into it, and it's hard to it's unlucky. I don't necessarily know if he's doing it on purpose. If he's trying to be cheeky, it's stupid to do that on a yellow. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean Palace played the rest of the game with 9 men, and that's the reason why the score ended up being 3-0. But one thing
Yeah,
to say is the guy that got the second goal is our team room.
that's right.
And it's a fantastic hit. It's a striker's finish. Mitrovic kind of tries to head the ball down, and it's close distance, but it's a volley, and he gets his leg over the top to keep it low, and he rifles it in. It's a nice goal.
Oh, yeah, it was great. And did you hear Pep? Pep apparently said if Tim Ream was younger, he would consider having him on City. So that's awesome too. He's what is he 34, 35? So he
I
is
think
older, but
yeah, they
yeah,
said it was his first
he's
goal
playing well.
at
Yeah, first goal.
35.
That's awesome. I think he's deserving of getting that goal because he's played well for Fulham. We've talked about him
He
and
has.
Anthony Robinson holding it down, and
Yep.
yeah, he's played well. I'm glad he finally scored. I think he deserved it for sure.
Yeah, and he used to be. He actually used to be a player that I used to slight a lot. At least, in the earlier times, because he's never really had pace to him.
Right,
But
he's very slow.
he's gotten clever. And
Yeah, and that's what's nice is you kind of need to.
yeah, and it's just one of those things where he doesn't look out of fit. With other center backs, and you're right. It is kind of unfortunate that he isn't just a little bit younger. But we can enjoy him now.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
and then
Yeah, and we enjoyed him at the World Cup too.
yep. And then Mitrovic ends up getting the third. He had a fantastic game. I think they only gave him one assist, but I really do credit him for the second goal. And then it's just kind of I think a ball that looped in by William, and Mitrovic is able to kind of head it in. But I mean, they haven't had Mitrovic for the last couple games. He had an injury before the World Cup, though
Yeah.
it was kind of shadiness to it because people were wondering, well, maybe he's just trying to stay healthy for the World Cup. But he was back, and they were good. They were good with him.
Yeah, and they need him too because he scores a bunch of goals when he's healthy. So a great target man, and he's up there in the Golden Boot too, and he's missing some games as well. So he's a good player, and he makes Fulham tick on the offensive end at least, and Ream is looking like he's kind of the guy that makes him tick on the defensive end. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm glad we have an American, starting regularly for a Premier League team. It's awesome.
Robinson as well, and yeah,
Yeah,
it
Robinson,
that
Adams, Aronson. Yeah, we got a ton now. You know, it's fun to see because it wasn't always that way. Like Donovan was one of the first guys, and he wasn't like a starter for Everton. He'd kind of come off the bench, so it's good to see, and I expect that number just to continue to rise, and hopefully, USA national team soccer will benefit from that as well.
Yeah, and what you think of Leeds with Aronson and Tyler Adams as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
right. You're right to touch on that. Things are starting to change a little bit, and I think that was maybe the reason why we showed up and looked better than people were expecting versus England, because we have a lot of
yeah.
guys that are actually playing week in and week out in that league now.
Against
Um,
those yeah players, yeah,
yeah,
spot on.
and then so that's pretty much it. We went over a little bit. I mean, yeah, one thing I'm trying to think about is, you mentioned Mitrovic kind of being, there for the Golden Boot, and this would be an interesting Golden Boot race right now if Holland was disqualified somehow, because Harry Kane I think is on 12 or 13, and then Mitrovic is on 11, and I think Tony's on 11 or 10. Um, so
Boy, is he damn.
and
Hmm.
so that's we'll just kind of do that. There'll be a silver boot, a silver boot award for the non-Holland.
I like
Um,
that, Ben. I like that a
there
lot.
we go. And so that's it. That was Boxing Day. That was, I mean, we hadn't had the league for a while. Yeah, I think then it wasn't just kind of players getting shaken off rust. I think we are as well. This wasn't necessarily the most smooth show, but yeah, it's good to kind of it's good to talk about it again. Um, and I guess that's it. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, man, it's good to be back in the swing of things, and no games today, but Friday we're back in the matches. So, yeah, it's good to be getting back, and yeah, I mean, it's fun, it's exciting. Things are tight at the top, things are tight at the bottom. It's where we want to be, right in the thick of the excitement.
And speaking of the thick of the excitement, probably the game of the weekend, I'm gonna say, is the Arsenal and Brighton one. So I'll be looking forward to that. Hopefully Liverpool can handle Leicester on Friday, and my Saturday I can just kind of enjoy that. And then it really gets spicy, I think, on the third when Arsenal play
Yeah.
Newcastle. So
Oh yeah, that's gonna
it's
be
two games back to
that.
back where we're gonna really see about Arsenal. And
Yeah,
again,
and we're gonna see about Newcastle too. A lot of things we're gonna learn in a short amount of days. So, yeah, man, it's exciting. We're back, and we're back in the thick of it too.
yeah, and it feels like everyone's just kind of waiting for Arsenal to slip up, and so far they haven't. And so you're right. Yeah, it's another test for that. And at least from what we've seen so far, there's no reason to think it would be otherwise. But we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
And so that's it. We're done officially. No more Boxing Day stuff. And I guess we will return and do a show talking about the weekend's games for, Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll try to
Yeah,
figure that out. Same place to find us on YouTube. I'll try to get the Spotify account going again. I've kind of during the World Cup I kind of didn't upload a ton of those, but yeah, I'll probably do that again. But anyways, that said, we'll just close off there and say, from us to at the reserve squad, you stay squatty
stay squatty, folks. Thanks for listening.
and stuff.